Wonderful, wonderful. Paula and Jess, thank you for leading us in worship and in music. And Leonard and Brother John, boy, both you guys, thank you for leading us in prayer and reading the words of truth. Seriously, I'm almost closing my eyes listening to those two guys. I'm thinking either Walter Cronkite or Paul Harvey. Let's listen to the rest of the story. I mean, seriously, they got amazing voices. Don't you agree? It's like, oh man, yeah, start your own podcast or something. But yeah, anyway, thank you for that. Well, family, we are within 2 weeks of Easter. Next Sunday is Palm Sunday, and then obviously the following week, through Holy Week, it will be Easter Sunday, where we celebrate the life and death and resurrection of the Son of God, Jesus Christ. And there are many times when we land on Easter where there are some who question and try to figure out, why did God have to go through all these pretty horrific events to get to the death and then eventually the resurrection? And so this morning we're going to spend just a few minutes and try to answer that why a little bit. There's a lot involved, but we're going to try to narrow it down to one little chapter in Luke 15. And so I'm going to kind of get this set up here a little bit. So in Luke 15, we have three different parables that we are all familiar with. And the first parable being the lost sheep that is found. The second parable that we are all familiar with is the lost coin that is found. And then the third parable that Jesus talks about is the lost son that is found. And so this morning we're going to talk about the lost son. And to kind of get us into that point, let's kind of talk about the backdrop here, Luke 15. And so in the first couple of verses that Leonard read to us, it says, all the tax collectors and sinners were approaching to listen to him, and the Pharisees and scribes were complaining, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So there we have it. There's just kind of a brief backdrop. You got two groups of folks here. We got sinners and tax collectors. Then we got the Pharisees and the scribes. So we got two groups. Pretty simple. And we all kind of know the backdrop of the tax collector, how despised they are. And again, we know about the sinners of the different lifestyles that they probably have been leading, whether it be prostitution, laziness, or partying, or whatever. And then we have the scribes and the Pharisees. Again, we know a lot about them, about being the educated, the righteous, and pretentious. And so with those verses that we just kind of read there, a couple of buzzwords. One, the first group with the tax collectors and the sinners. They came to listen to Jesus, came to listen to him. Then we look at that second group, the scribes and the Pharisees. They came complaining about this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So, scene one, the revolt. It says that there was a man who had two sons. So obviously if he had two sons, there are two brothers. And usually when you talk about two brothers, you're going to probably be talking about conflict, brothers. Okay, I'm not going any further with that. So we know of a lot of brothers, Jacob and Esau. Esau didn't go too well. However, there's the Wright brothers, did pretty well. There's the Kennedy brothers. They did okay. And then, and then we also had the brothers of, Jeff and Kerry. Oh, Jeff and Kerry. Okay, so there was once a time when when my dad got transferred to Littleton, where we actually had to move to Littleton for, it was about 14 months, but my brother Jeff and I decided, let's share a room. It's like, oh yeah, that's what brothers do. Let's share a room. And it's like, okay, let's get our own business going. Let's like have it enterprises. We'll call it JK Enterprises. It's like, how about KJ? No, JK. Okay, it's like, okay, we figured it out. Because to have an enterprise, we're going to need to have some money. So we decided to have a newspaper route. Okay, so here it is, the beginning of summertime, and we're starting a newspaper route, ages 7 and 9 or 7 and 10. And okay, what's the likeliness of that summer proceeding with two brothers at the age 7 and 10 having a newspaper route where they got to deliver a newspaper every single day? And there are games going on. There's soccer, there's baseball, there's basketball, there's hide and go seek, all going on in the playground, and we have to deliver newspapers? Yeah, and so we went a couple of weeks delivering these papers, and we'd get back home in our nice shared bedroom, and let me tell you how that ended. Basically, whenever you're sharing a bedroom with your brother and you have conflict, you get the tape out and you put the tape right down the middle of your bedroom. That's what you do. It's like, that's a great compromise. That's a great resolve. The issue, though, is if the bunk beds are on one side of the bedroom and the doorway's on the other side of the bedroom and there's tape going right down the middle, that doesn't work so well. Yeah, the Planet of the Apes action figures on one side, the electric train set on the other. So anyway, our enterprise quickly dissolved. And so here we have it. We have two brothers. A man had two sons. And the two brothers at one point gathered with the father. And the younger brother asked the father, I want my share of the estate. I want my share of the inheritance. I want it all. And then the father says, okay. He gives it to him. And in the text that we read, that's kind of the only conversations we hear. But if we have a father in the middle of the table and the one brother on each side, and I wonder what the older brother's thinking at that point. It's like, Dad, your art of negotiation's not good. You didn't ask anything. You didn't put any conditions on this gift that you're giving him. Younger brother doesn't know anything. He hasn't done anything to earn it. In fact, I'd call him lazy. And you just gave it to him. Again, the text doesn't say that, but, and I'm not an older brother. I can only think how a younger brother thinks, but I would think an older brother, that's probably what he's thinking. And so the younger brother takes all that is his. There's no please, thank you, you're welcome. He just takes it. Willful, planned. It's mine, Dad. Scene 2, the rebellion, verses 13 through 16. The younger brother, the younger son, hears the invitation of the world and is drawn to this new freedom, is drawn to the money and the alcohol and the parties and the women and just this whole lifestyle. So what does he do? He leaves his dad and he leaves his brother, leaves his home and goes to this foreign land with this whole new freedom. And then he loses it all, the entire estate. The brother is trying to find something to fill himself with. And once the money is dried up, once that well is dried up and there's no more money, there's no more parties, the only thing left from the alcohol is a hangover. And if the money's gone, the women are gone. Relationships have just been disappointing. And it's pretty easy for us to get down on the younger son, thinking about how irresponsible, how reckless he was. And there is actually a moment there where he's actually being resourceful. And he's like, well, I've lost it all, but I'm going to at least try to go and work, because that's one thing that my father did tell me about was working, and my brother did tell me about working, so I'm going to go work. And when the citizens of the foreign land send him out to the field to feed the pigs. Okay, so as you know, Tony and I have come here from Iowa. In Iowa, pork is king. Absolutely. And there's a couple things that you notice when you come from an area where pork is king. Working in the fields of pigs or hog confinements, hog barns, hog pens is probably at the bottom of the pyramid of most desired jobs. And it's awful. And I know talking to others that grew up on the pig farm, and they would talk about how they'd have to go and work with the pigs, and they would go back to the house and they would just shower up, get cleaned up, do laundry, just try and get everything cleaned up, and they'd go to school the next day, and they still have that stench of pigs on them. And it's almost becomes like a social thing where it's like, I just cannot get rid of that stench. The second thing that you know is that you never see an outhouse, a restroom, a commode, even a 5-gallon bucket in the middle of a pig pen. Yeah, it's obviously you don't see that. But maybe what isn't so obvious, so you got a little area with a lot of pigs. They're walking, they're playing, they're sleeping, all in the same area. And it's pretty easy as a farmer. You just get your 5-gallon bucket and you throw all the wasted food in this pen, and they're still doing that. Well, then there's still an issue. Okay, I'm going to go, I'm not real family friendly here. They got to poop. They got to poop in the pen. The poop in the pen goes in the food that they eat. Like, well, that's pretty gross. But that's what pigs do. So here we have the younger son who was put out to the fields to work in the fields to feed the pigs, and he has lost everything, lost it all. And he's down to the basic instinct of, I am hungry. I mean, there's one thing I do know is I am hungry, and here it is, I got to eat the pig slop. Like, I would say that's the bottom of bottom to that point. But actually, the worst part of this bottom of bottom is not necessarily that he's got to eat pig slop, is that he's separated from the Father. That is the bottom of the bottom. Okay, so let's take a step back again and look at these two groups of people. You got the sinners and you got the tax collectors. Here in this story, this parable, and it's like, yeah, I've done that. Actually, I'm there right now. And then you got the Pharisees and the scribes that have been listening, and they're like, yeah, Jesus is getting this right. The no good, lazy, younger son, he's completely fouled it up. We think that Jesus has finally got this figured out. It's like, yeah, there's nothing to redeem here. The son has screwed it up. Have you ever been lost? And any time that you may have been lost, what were some of those feelings like? Let's hike it up a notch. Have you ever lost a child, like in a mall or where, again, your child that wandered off? If you think about the feeling with one and feeling with the other, to me, I think as a parent or as a father, where you don't know where your child is or where you don't know where your grandchild is, that's a horrible, horrible feeling. My only son, blessed that he was a wanderer, and he would, when he was about 4 years old, 4 or 5, and we went to a parade there in this nice community, and there's tons of people there, and this is before cell phone days, and we watched the parade, and we're going back and trying to gather ourselves, and there's no Travis. Like, that is the worst feeling. And we eventually found Travis after looking around for like an hour, and just like, oh my goodness. But yes, as a parent, as a mother, as a father, as a grandfather, as a grandmother, as an aunt, as an uncle, when that child is misplaced, that feeling sucks. It's awful. And so I think being lost, that's a pretty scary feeling. But as a parent, it's more than scary. It just like wrenches your heart. Scene 3, verses 17 through 19, the reminder. The son starts thinking about, you know what, even my father's workers have more than enough. So he starts considering and thinking about, if I go back, what should I say? What will I say? And you kind of think about that back when you were a child and you kind of screwed something up. And it's like, okay, I need to tell my parents something. I need to come up with something because I totally fouled this up. It's like, I was going here and I didn't know. I just ended up at this party where there's a bunch of beer. We were going to the movie theater. And it's like, oh my goodness. And you just start rehearsing it. You just start thinking about it. And it's like, oh, so this is what he's doing. This is what the son's starting to do. He's starting to think about, okay, what am I going to say? Almost playing that what if game. What if, I say this and he says that, or, what if I'll work as a servant, I'll work as a slave, I'll do anything's better than this current state that I am in. But the one thing that I do know, if I go back and the things that I do say and the things that he might make me do, I will not be separated from him anymore. That is one thing I do know. One of the early church fathers by the name of St. Augustine said that the desire for grace is the beginning of grace. In scene 4, the return. So the son got up and went to the father, and his father ran to him, threw his arms around, and he kissed him. And so it's kind of hard to see the painting behind me, but this painting is called The Prodigal Son, and it's a painting that's done by a famous artist by the name of Mr. Rembrandt. The painting is currently in St. Petersburg. But it's easy just to kind of take a glance at it and just automatically know that it's the prodigal son and the father. But one of the unique features of a Rembrandt, it's always kind of dark around the object of the painting because the focus is to go right into what the objects are, the radiance, the glowing. With this painting, you see the son that has returned to the father. His clothes are tattered. He's dirty. And if you look really closely at it, you'd also see that his sandals are basically torn off his feet. It could be from the hard labor that he was doing. It could have been him running back to home. We really don't know. But that's the son. Let's take a look at the father. Again, if we kind of take a quick look, and the son's head is resting on the father's chest. And it looks pretty real, looks pretty sincere. And if you really take a close look at the father and his hands as he's placed them on the son, and if you take a close look, they are gentle hands. They're not rough. They almost look like motherly hands. Again, they're soft. And you look at the position of the son, almost look like a motherly hands nursing a child. Because if you look at the son, it almost looks like a head of an infant, which is kind of odd, but not really. Because does a mother ever forget nursing her child? Or as a parent, remember those first moments holding your child, holding your son, your daughter, or even your grandchildren, holding them, snuggling with them. The smell of love just comes from that embrace. And one of the things that you do know is that you hope that embrace never ends. And so the son returns, and he recites the speech, word for word. I mean, he nailed it. He totally nailed it. He didn't miss a skip. And you know what? The father does not even acknowledge what he said at all. It's like, oh man. And what does the father do after he embraces him? He says, bring a robe, bring some sandals, bring a ring, bring the fattened calf, for my son was dead, and he is alive. He was lost, and now he is found. He's back to the table. He has returned, and they began to celebrate. It's time to P-A-R-T-Y, party like it's 1999. Come and celebrate, good time. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was some fun times. It was some very fun times. Oh my, yeah, if we could have all been there. However, yes, but, we look in the painting, off to the side is the older brother. We call this scene the refusal. And if we read from the text, the brother was getting it right. He was a hard worker. In fact, the text states that while the celebration was going on, the older brother is out in the field. Of course he's out in the field. He's working. In fact, if he was on that show, The Apprentice, he would have won that thing. Absolutely. The guy knew how to work. In fact, he was up when the sun was up, and he probably continued to work after the sun was down. He was a hard worker. And here he is out in the field, and he must not have been too far from home because he could hear the celebrating. And he goes up to one of the servants, one of the other workers, like, hey, what's going on here? And the servant looks at him and is like, oh, there's a party going on in there. Your younger brother has returned home. And, what does the older brother do? Does he run to the party? He's like, yeah, let's go in. No. He gets a little ticked. Yeah, he's a little upset. He has a little fit. I'm not going in there. I got some work to do. I'm a self-made man. I got my dignity. I got my respect. I'm not going to run in there for my younger brother. It's not going to happen. All these self-help books I've read about, you don't do that. You don't curtail to your younger brother. That's the last thing you do. So what does a father do? Father just doesn't wait for him. The father goes out to the older brother, and he pleads with him. What the heck? He pleads with him. If anyone had a right, it was the father's like, again, pardon my French, but get your head out of your butt. Get on in there. But he doesn't do that at all. He says, my son was lost and is found. My son was dead and he's alive. And then there the parable ends. It's done with. We don't hear anymore. We don't know if the son ever made it in. And I would think that this was intentional. Kind of leave this as a question. What happened to the brother? What happened to the older brother? I would, if it was my guess, I would say the place at that table remained empty. The plate was full, but there was no older brother. And I'm willing to be corrected on that. And it's easy for us to get down on the older brother, and it's like, oh, what a jerk, acting that way to the father. And it's actually easy to get down on the younger brother to be entitled and planned and willful disobedience. But you know what? It's not about the alcohol. It's not about the sex. It's not about the being careless, reckless with your money and being bankrupt. It's not about that. Just like back in Genesis, it wasn't about the fruit. It wasn't about the apple. It's about, as a result of disobedience, there's a separation. That's what it's about. The fact that the son was gone, he was separated from the father, that is what this is about. And about the older brother is still separated, as righteous as he was. Yeah, he wasn't into the drugs and the alcohol. He was in the Sunday school. He was in the church. He's religious. But he was still separated from the father because he didn't know what it was like to have intimacy with the father. He didn't know what it was like to rest his head on the father's chest as his father's hands caressed him and cared for him. There was a separation there. There was a disconnect. So, have you ever been lost? Are you lost? reality check. While we are in our rebellion and refusal to admit that we are lost, we don't have any right for that tender generosity we call grace. Yet in our broken state, if we find ourselves and we admit our brokenness and we return and we repent, we are welcomed and we find Jesus. We get to know Jesus. We get to love Jesus. Repent and find yourself in the lavishing arms of the Father. Come back with your dirt. Come back with your tattered clothes and your worn sandals, and put on the robe that covers you in love. Place on the sandals that will carry you with life of joy. Put on the ring where now you have an identity as a child of God. For there is no sin, there is no rebellion that is out of reach of his forgiveness. Yeah, awake my soul. And Brother John, thanks for reading John 3:16. Seriously, we cannot hear that verse enough. It just, man, say the gospel to yourself every single day. It will take root. Trust me, it will. Our final scene, the rise. So there was once a pastor over on the West Coast, and he was being interviewed about his upbringing, about his childhood. And this pastor said, yeah, each night I'd go into my bedroom and I'd lay on my bed, and my father would come in and we'd talk about the day, we'd read some stories, and then we'd always recite our nightly prayers. And at the end of their prayer, his father, who was a prolific writer and author, Eugene Peterson, would lean over and whisper to his son in his son's ear these four things. God loves you. God is on your side. He is coming after you. He is relentless. Simple, true. A lavish grace awaits you. Awake, my soul. Sing your praises aloud. A sheep was lost, was found, a party. A coin was lost, was found, when they celebrated. And when the father's lost son was found, a party like no other. For this we know, he welcomes sinners and eats with them. He welcomes sinners and eats with them. So this morning, we're going to have communion, and we're going to do things just a little bit different. We're going to be playing a music video to kind of prepare our hearts for the communion this morning.